Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here, columnist Jeremy Price, back at Assembly Hall, and just found out, obviously, well not just found out, a few hours ago found out, Indiana's destinations, their bracket, everything for the NCAA tournament. They are the number one seed in the East region. They will be playing their second and third round games in Dayton, starting with Friday when they'll play either Long Island, Brooklyn, or James Madison, which I just happened to cover before I got here. And from there, another game in Dayton, and then Washington, D.C. Regional. So I guess in a way a little bit of disappointment because they didn't get the overall number one seed, which they were apparently very much up for, and they were apparently the only team that had clinched the number one seed by about Saturday. But Louisville's Big East title, their comeback win over Syracuse on Saturday night, apparently bumped the Cardinals up to the overall number one seed and gave them the number one seed in the Midwest, which means a path through Indianapolis. But to me, I think Indiana might have got the best possible scenario here. They got to me, I think a nice looking bracket with some teams that I think, certainly everybody's got a difficult one, but I think it sets up well for Indiana.
Yeah, it's not a bad deal, and I don't think it's a huge penalty not playing in Indianapolis. I mean, that as nice as it would have been, I don't think that it's that crucial. It's not a situation where, if they go to Indianapolis, they're definitely getting through. They go to Washington, they're definitely not. I don't think that's the case at all. And, it's really all about matchups and who you play. And to be honest with you, like you said, the bracket sets up nicely, but really, in some ways, it seems like these first couple of games, not the first game, obviously, so much, but the second game.
You sleeping on James Madison? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. The second game and then maybe the first game of the Sweet 16 might actually be two of the toughest that they have to get through. And if they can get through that, I don't want to say clear sailing, but certainly it opens up a bit. I think.
There's not a team on the other half of the bracket. Miami's obviously a very, very good team. That's the two seed on the other half of the bracket. Marquette's certainly a really good team. Butler's on that side of the bracket. You never know if they could sneak by everybody. They are Butler. They have done that. It would not be unprecedented for that group. They've gotten to the championship game as an 8 seed. It's not crazy at all. But you definitely look at it and you say, these aren't teams that necessarily match up with them badly, that have something that Indiana can't beat. Certainly an interesting, I think, setup is the possibility of playing Syracuse as the 4 seed, basically. Obviously, Syracuse with that, they haven't played a team that lives and dies by a 2-3 zone. I mean, Syracuse has done that. That's their calling card. That's what they do. And, sometimes it really works well. Sometimes it doesn't, but it's certainly going to be something. Obviously, Indiana's seen zone before, and in fact, they've played it really, really well against it. I think Tom Crean said their points possession against the zone is something like 1.4, which is incredible. But they haven't seen anybody who just does that. It's usually a change of pace. So that's an interesting matchup. You said North Carolina State, certainly more was expected from them this year. They've got a lot of athletes, had a phenomenal freshman class they brought in, certainly gave Indiana a really tough game last year, which is actually one of the first games that really got them going when Indiana beat them in Raleigh. But yeah, I think the early games are interesting. UNLV certainly has a lot of great athletes, and Anthony Bennett especially being the star freshman out there, and that could be the tough half of the bracket. But I don't think that they have an overwhelming other side. I think there's a lot of other 2 seeds that they had to be happy not to get. Louisville gets that Midwest number 1, but they don't have an easy bracket at all. They've got 2 seed Duke, 3 seed Michigan State, 4 seed is St. Louis, who has been red hot and rolled through the Atlantic 10 and looks like a very, very dangerous team right now. In some ways, I think if they played this exact, where it matters is if they played this exact bracket, if they took the bracket that they have and moved it to the Midwest, you got to think, wow, you really set yourself up nice. But if all the Midwest was going to do is literally move Indiana from where it is to where Louisville is, I don't know if you'd make that trade.
Yeah, I agree. I think probably the bracket Indiana is probably most glad to avoid would be the one Gonzaga has. You start looking at the teams in that bracket, you're looking at Pittsburgh, Wisconsin, Kansas State in the top half of that bracket, all teams that want to play a tough, grinded-out, physical style of play that probably not terribly well suited to Indiana. Now, the bottom half of that bracket is a little different matter.
Well, Ohio State,
outside
too,
of Ohio
is a
State,
team that likes to grind it as well. And certainly, I think just in terms of, I don't know, the weirdness of it, I don't think they'd want to play New Mexico, frankly. Not that it's fair. It's certainly not fair. This discussion that always comes out about Steve Alford and whatnot, and there's certainly always going to be some, traditionalists and people that remember the old days that always wish Steve Alford was coaching Indiana, and that would make for that whole weird emotional scene, whatever that would mean. And certainly it would be, I think, just strange for them to play Alford and have him go up against his former school. I mean, that would just be sort of a weird situation. Now, there were probably some people that would think it was just cool just to see them guys together, but it would be an odd situation, I think.
Well, the NCAA has never been opposed to odd situations.
No, they love
in the
odd
NCAA
situations,
tournament.
actually. And which is part of the reason why Marquette's in the second half of the bracket.
I mean,
So,
Marquette
suddenly
and
they
New
thought
Mexico
about that.
were both 3 seeds, and you had to know that they were going to throw one of those two in Indiana's bracket. I mean,
Oh, yeah,
how could
definitely.
they just not?
Yeah, I mean, they have a sense of irony. Is it irony? I don't really know. Whatever it is, the NCAA likes those kind of matchups,
Irony,
sort of
karma.
made for TV things, and I don't think there's a problem with that. I mean, I think that's certainly the reason why Indiana played Kentucky last year in the Sweet 16. I mean, they had the opportunity to do it. If Indiana was on that 4 seed line and that's where they belonged, is why not stage that one again?
And that's probably
it's
why
good for casual fans, certainly.
Yeah, and that's probably why you see North Carolina, Kansas possible second round matchup.
Absolutely. They think about that stuff. Yeah, Roy Williams got to coach against Kansas, sure. But it's interesting. And we talked to the guys afterwards, and also Tom Crean as well. And they obviously, anytime we asked about, were you a little bit disappointed about Indy? No, we weren't thinking about that. And Christian Watford even said, I think we play better on the road. And there's something to be said for that. I'm not sure. They certainly did play very well on the road this year. We're 7-2 on the road this year. Won some huge games. Went out and won at Michigan State, at Michigan, at Ohio State. Won at some of the toughest places to play in the Big Ten. And there is something to be said for the fact that if they did play in Indianapolis, as much as you'd have the home crowd and you'd certainly have all the fans on their side, there would just be a lot of expectation there. I mean, they would go in there and it would be considered a much bigger sort of burden in terms of if they didn't get through there.
Yeah.
There would be just a lot of pressure. I mean, in a way, they're a little bit freer out east.
Yeah, they would sort of be one of those already crowned situations before you've gone through the process.
Yeah, there would be such an expectation of you're in Indianapolis. How do you not make it out?
And I definitely think there was a sense of relief in there, but I don't know that it was a sense of relief of not playing in Indianapolis so much as just a sense of relief.
Just getting the 1 seed.
This this whole thing's out there, and now they
It's
know
there.
what's in front of them.
Right. They know what the path is. They're not sure. They don't have to think about, and you don't know how much they do or do not think about it. They tell you they don't, certainly, that they don't consider, what's this mean for seeding and what's this game? You just try to go out and win every game, and that's what you do. But you do have to wonder, especially when they lose a game like Wisconsin on Saturday, what all did they start thinking about what they had lost? Like, how much did it play on their minds in the last 24 hours in terms of, okay, what did this do to us? They certainly knew that the Louisville game was going to decide a lot, and you have to imagine that when they were watching Syracuse just collapse, at the end of that game, they just had to be shaking their heads like, what have we done? What have we lost here? But now I think that they do get a sense of, okay, this is what we have. Indiana's like everybody else. I mean, everybody's got alumni in D.C. Indiana will have people. I mean, because obviously so much with government jobs and everything, like so many people have a big alumni base. Indiana certainly has one of them. And they, had a pretty decent amount of fans for the football game when they played in D.C. a few years ago. Certainly wasn't as much as Penn State did, but there are people in Indiana, in D.C. to come out from that. People will be able to travel. It's not a crazy road trip like Portland was last year. It's certainly a place they can get to without too much of an expense. They'll have, I think, just enough backing out there. If of course they get there, they have to get through Dayton first. And they certainly have some backing in Dayton as well. So they kind of have all those stuff going for it. And at the end of the day, it's just not a bad deal.
And I thought D.C. was interesting also just from a recruiting pipeline standpoint. Indiana's
Yes,
established
absolutely.
that already. Kenny Johnson's from that area. And can't hurt to put yourself on display
Not
in
at all.
an area you're recruiting hard like Indiana is.
Yeah, and certainly that's Victor Oladipo's hometown. And I asked him about that. He wasn't ready to play into it yet, certainly. But you got to imagine if they win that second game against Dayton and it becomes a reality that he's going to get to go play in front of his home crowd, his family, everything else in D.C., you're going to see that kid light up. And I think he could use it because, I think he looks a little bit tired, frankly, more than some other guys. I mean, he's had to put in a lot. He's an extremely energetic guy. It just seems like it's starting to wear on him a little bit. I think that adds a spark there. It's something like that, the opportunity to go play back home. It adds some degree of motivation and just be like, this is my town. I get to play in my town again.
Yeah, I think that would definitely give him a spark. I think this whole NCAA tournament kind of gives the whole team a spark.
Sure.
Kind of you've gone through the first part of the regular season. Now the Big Ten tournament is over. Now you're to the part that's going to make or break, define really how successful this season is.
How you're viewed. Yeah. No, and I think Tom Izzo said it when, during his press conference yesterday after they lost to Ohio State, and Tom Crean sort of reiterated it today, that, the Big Ten teams are just sort of tired of playing each other. That they're, Izzo said, we're just beating, he said, we keep beating the hell out of each other. And I just want to play somebody else and play somebody that doesn't know everything that we do, that hasn't seen every play, and it's maybe a little bit less physical. It's a little bit less grinding. I mean, nobody's, sees all your plays and knows them all and can get up into you and can stop everything you want to do. It becomes a more open game. It's not quite as open as what you see in November and December where teams are really starting to figure each other out. They've got film on you, but they can only, kids can only digest it to a certain level within a week. I mean, you can get a lot of stuff done. Certainly, there's going to be some managers and GAs who aren't going to sleep between now and Friday, who are going to get all this stuff together, and they'll have a scouting report that'll make a lot of sense and a lot of film. But it's not the same as, what Wisconsin does, what Michigan does, what Michigan State does. These are going to be teams that they're going to have to figure out and do it on the fly, and especially once they get past the first one, they have to do it on the fly again, go from one to the other, and everybody gets to play a little bit freer.
Yeah, and I think overall I agree with the idea that the Big Ten season is going to help these teams because you've already played elite level competition, you've seen what it's like. You're not going to play anybody any better than what you've seen already. But the downside of that is the possibility that just the mental fatigue of that season kind of drags on, and there's sort of a carryover hangover effect sometimes, and that's kind of the challenge to get through. And I think maybe once you get through this first weekend, that kind of goes away. But this first weekend is where that can play a role.
Absolutely. So it's going to be interesting. And again, they got a pretty decent draw. It's not a bad, getting shipped out to DC was not the worst thing.
Not at all.
Anyway, thanks everybody.